how are the orphans in Playtime Co. still alive? In the beginning of chapter 4, as Poppy goes back up to help Kissy, she quickly mentions that there's still time to save the orphans, and then gets cut off by a burst of smoke. But when we regroup and make it to Safe Haven, Poppy tells us that it's the prototype who's keeping them down in the labs, and our goal is to make it all the way down to the labs, safely extract the orphans, and escape before the bombs can go off, which means the prototype must need the orphans for some special reason. And I mean special. This man did not care to kill Catnap even though he literally worshipped him. But to figure out that reason, we have to go back to a hard to find tape that requires a key card that you need to get during the Sarlie Hoyer sequence. But if you manage to get it and go behind where Harley's brain was kept, you'll find a VHS tape as well as a radio, both of which have clues to help us figure out what's really going on.
What's a dozen children? 1,000? Next to this. What would they have been otherwise? I made their lives matter.
Your suggestions?
To produce the results I'm after, we just need more time to perfect the time. Time is precisely what we do not have. That will give me labs access. You will still not. Fine, but you have no staff, virtually no test subjects. It's hardly ideal conditions. You can't expect to do it on your own so quickly. The situation necessitates it be done.
In the tape, when Harley and the prototype were arguing, they're running out of time to do something. But Harley also mentions that they don't have that many test subjects. So could this mean that the orphans were being tested on? This would explain why the prototype kept Harley alive, since Sawyer has years and years of experimenting on the orphans and turning them into toys. Is it possible that the prototype is trying to make more toys come to life? It could be why he even took them in the first place. But when we compare it to the radio, we don't exactly know when this was recorded, but if this was recorded after they started working together, then that could mean that they're working on something that's actually gonna benefit many kids. It's just that they're killing them to get to that point. But whether they need the kids for experimentation or for anything really, how are the orphans still alive? In order for them to survive this long, the prototype must have some sort of food and water source that we don't know about, because these kids are most likely locked up in some sort of prison. Otherwise, they just try to escape. But if they've been down here for over 10 years, some of these kids are full-grown adults by this point. And this leads me to believe that the prototype is feeding them somehow, which could even be the reason that Harley and him are running out of time. It's already hard to believe that the orphans have been surviving this long, and so it's possible their time constraint is for a lack of food. Initially, you might think that they could just eat all of the bodies and they're piled up outside of the prison, which would explain how they've survived for so long, since there's probably tens of thousands of them just right here, which then means that Playtime's experiments have been going on for an extremely long time, because if every last one of these bodies is another orphan, just think about how many kids were killed in the name of science. But there's another problem with this theory. If all of these toys have been sitting here for years, rotting away and decaying, if you eat one of these things, you are going to get hepatitis W, bro. And because we know that the prototype is probably smarter than us, he would know not to feed the orphans rotten food, because then they'd eventually die from food poisoning or disease. So there would have to be somewhere the prototype is getting all this food, either fresh or food that lasts for an extremely long amount of time, which leads me to my next theory. The prototype could be feeding them the bodies of the bigger bodies toys. If we look back to chapter 3, when we fight fight Catnap after shooting him with our overcharged green hand, he bursts out into flames once he tries to dispense the red smoke. And although he rolls around in pain, eventually he's good enough to sit up and get on his knees. And because Catnap didn't just kill us right then and there, and the prototype instead killed him and dragged him away, what if the prototype needs us alive and he's using Catnap's fresh meat as food for the orphans? We know that Catnap worships the prototype, as when he gets on his knees with his arms out, he's pretty much giving up his life to what he believes to be his god for some kind of greater purpose. And so this purpose might be whatever the prototype needs to do with the orphans, and Catnap's sacrifice would be a way of prolonging the time needed to finally finish his plan. But the one problem with this theory is that when we complete all 3 games in the game station back in chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs is chasing us down trying to kill us. However, once we make it into a room with the most conveniently placed grinder, might I add, I'm not even gonna cut out the stutter, we flip the lever which pulls her hand and then her foot, killing her. But while she's being grinded, she screams this out:
"You make me part of you! You can't do this to me!"
And right after she tells us this, the prototype does not waste any time and quickly retrieves what's left of her, meaning he was probably watching the whole thing and waiting for the perfect time to strike. But because she said he'll make me part of him, and in chapter 3 during the bridge section when we see Catnap worshipping a shrine made up of many different toy bodies, I'm about to lose my breath, hold on. It's possible that the prototype isn't feeding the orphans, but instead using the bodies for his own purposes. So the one other way that the prototype could be getting food for the orphans is through Playcare. Because of how many bodies we see outside the prison, and with Home Sweet Home being massive, and there being like 30 different Miss Delights just in the Hour of Joy tape, there must have been thousands upon thousands of orphans living down here. But to feed all of those orphans, you're gonna need a booty load of food and water. And because the orphans seem to just be a means to an end, then it's possible that Playtime didn't care what they ate, as long as they stayed alive and were somewhat healthy, both in mind and body, to perform well in the game station tests. So Playcare could just have hundreds of thousands of different meals that are all either canned or even similar to MREs, as they both last an incredible amount of time and can feed a lot of people without taking much space. So if they all had MREs, all they need is water, which wouldn't be that hard to get, as in chapter 2 we see the water treatment plant, which probably has enough water for a few hundred orphans to live out their whole lives. And here's a crazy question. Because of the fact that the prototype never tried to stop us from killing Sawyer and the whole fight was pretty easy, what if the prototype already cracked whatever he was trying to find? And so now he no longer needs Sawyer or time and is ready to do whatever he wants to the orphans to finally bring his 10-year plan to a close. Well, if that's the case, then chapter 5 probably is gonna be the best chapter by far. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.